Gospel for this morning is from Luke, chapter 18, verses 1 through 8. It's a little parable of Jesus on, as it says at the beginning, how we ought to always be in prayer and not lose heart. So just so you could hear this maybe a little more like people would have heard it when Jesus first told it, there are two characters in this parable. One is a judge and one is a widow. So widows in the biblical tradition, especially in the Hebrew Bible, were a kind of protected class of people because of the way families worked and the economy worked. If your husband died, you really were bereft. You had no way to make a living if your husband's family didn't take you in. And if your own family didn't take you back, you were in a desperate situation. So over and over and over again, the Hebrew Bible says that there's kind of a special provision for widows and for orphans and for strangers or foreigners, this vulnerable class. So there's a widow in this story, and then there's a judge in this story, and the understanding of judges was this, that God is sort of up in heaven and can't be here down on earth to ensure that there is justice, especially for these protected classes. And so the judge was here to be kind of the representative of God on earth bringing justice. So with that, listen, friends, to this parable that Jesus tells us. Then Jesus told them a parable about their need to pray always and not to lose heart. He said, "In a certain city there was a judge who neither feared God nor had respect for people. In that city there was a widow who kept coming to him and saying, 'Grant me justice against my accuser.' For a while the judge refused, but later he said to himself, 'Though I have no fear of God and no respect for anyone, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will grant her justice so that she may not wear me out by continually coming.' And the Lord said, 'Listen to what the unjust judge says. And will not God grant justice to his chosen ones who cry out to him day and night? Will he delay long in helping them? I tell you, he will quickly grant justice to them. And yet, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth?'" Friends, this is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. So I read an article on the Brookings Institution's website this week that said that there are 345 candidates who will be on the ballot this November who have expressed election denial beliefs at one time or another. The false claim that the presidential election in 2020 was somehow flawed. In short, these 345 people have in some ways affirmed the big lie that Donald Trump actually won the 2020 election. And I think, as most of us know, there has been no evidence to support those claims. Even the former Attorney General, Bill Barr, has said over and over and over again, there is no evidence to support the claims that Donald Trump won that election. So the article goes on to point out that many of these candidates, if elected, will actually have control over how their state's elections are run. Now, if there's anything in the political realm that we Presbyterians should get riled up about, it's a threat to free and fair elections, right? All we do is vote. All we do is vote on things. And in a way, for us, voting, I don't think this is too far, this is a stretch. In a way, voting for us is kind of a sacred thing. So we have this idea in the Presbyterian Church, in the Reformed tradition, of the priesthood of all believers. It means that you and I all have the Spirit of God within us. And that when we express ourselves, all of us, we discover the will of God. So we don't have this idea that a pope kind of hears that and gives it to everyone else. We are all a priesthood of all believers, and so the Spirit is in all of us, and so if we want to know God's will, we need to hear every voice. So as I said, if anything should offend us, it's that someone would not be able to vote. And imagine if that happened within this congregation. When we had a congregational vote electing our leaders, some people came and said, "We think that was rigged." It would ruin our whole communal life together. So voting is sacred to us. So anyway, the other day I was talking with someone about the state of our current politics, and I said, "Do you think people actually believe that Donald Trump won this election, or is it that they will just say or do anything to either retain power or to be elected and gain power, even if it means repeating this kind of dangerous lie about our elections?" And I think the truth is you just have to watch how some candidates were election deniers in the primaries and then changed their mind as soon as they got into the general election. You just have to read those stories to know that, yes, people will indeed repeat a lie to gain or retain power. And we see this over and over again with all political stripes. People will do almost anything to retain power. So people in power who are willing to lie to keep it, that is certainly discouraging. But worse is people who lie and who know that they are lying, but persist in the lie because they know you have no power to do anything about it. Okay, that's a long sentence, but it's sort of like Kim Jong-un getting 100% of the vote. We know that did not happen, but you can't do anything about it. So to me, that's sort of like a bully. I don't know if you remember seeing this when you were in junior high or high school, but a bully who grabs your arm and starts hitting you in the face with it and says, "Why are you hitting yourself? Why are you hitting yourself? Why don't you stop hitting yourself?" It's sort of like that. It's not just discouraging, it's this kind of hopeless situation. So this is nothing new. People who will abuse their power to keep their power. And so this is clear when Jesus tells us this parable of the widow and the unjust judge. The judge did not fear God. By his own admission, he did not fear God, which means he did not care the least bit about what was right and what was wrong. And the judge also has no respect for people. He freely admits this. So why would you want to be a judge if you don't care about justice? That's what a judge is for. Why do you want to be a judge if you don't care about justice? And I think the answer is, well, you have power over people's lives. You get bribes. You get honor. You get fame. So, as I said earlier, judges were supposed to be God's representatives on earth. They were supposed to look out for the least and the last, especially widows and orphans and strangers. And the Hebrew Bible takes this very seriously. So listen to some of the things the Bible says about this. "Cursed be anyone who deprives a widow of justice." And this, "For the Lord your God executes justice for the orphan and the widow." And then this, "You shall not abuse any widow or orphan. If you do abuse them, my wrath will burn and I will kill you with the sword." Okay, this is serious business. God is serious about taking care of these protected classes. So it's pretty clear that God was on the side of widows, and judges were supposed to be as well. But this judge does not fear God and does not care in the least about the welfare of widows. And not only, as I said, does the narrator say this about the judge, but the judge says it himself. "I have no fear of God and no respect for anyone." And it's a little bit terrifying to have people in power like that. People who are in charge of justice who admit something like that. And I think it's worth mentioning that when Jesus is asked in the Gospels, what's the greatest commandment? He answers that it is to love God with your whole being and to love your neighbor as you love yourself. And this is exactly what the judge does not do. He does not love God. He doesn't respect or fear God. And he doesn't respect people. He doesn't love or respect his neighbors. He is the worst sort of person to be in charge of justice. So the parable says that a certain widow came to this certain judge and asked him, "Grant me justice against my accuser or my adversary or my opponent." And it seems maybe a bit curious that Jesus doesn't mention what injustice this widow has suffered. We don't hear that part of the story. Why not heighten the tension of this parable by kind of listing all the ways that this woman has had to endure injustice? But I suspect that part is left out because everybody hearing this parable already knew the injustices that widows suffered. So, as I said, this woman has lost her husband. She's supposed to be cared for by her husband's family, and maybe that's not happening. Maybe her own family has not taken her in, and she's in this very desperate situation. But all you have to hear is a widow went before a judge, and you know already what's going on. It might be a bit like seeing a headline like this: family loses home in flood and sues insurance company. Like, we don't need to read the story to know what's going on there, right? Like, insurance companies deny people's claims all the time. So a widow goes before a judge. We already know the story. So this widow goes before the judge, and before she even gets there, we know her cause is hopeless because we know what kind of judge he is. Not because she doesn't have a case, but because this judge doesn't care about justice. So it's this kind of hopeless situation, and how could she possibly win with all this stacked against her? And the answer is persistence. She could win even in that desperate situation because of her persistence. And I have to admit, persistence does not always produce justice immediately. Often you see people persisting and persisting and persisting, and that justice is going to come long after they're gone. But sometimes it does come. So I'm sure you have seen this week that a jury ordered Alex Jones to pay nearly $1 billion to the Sandy Hook families that he has spent years defaming. And part of this story has been the dogged determination of these families to get some kind of justice. They just were not going to give up. Not only justice for their families, for their murdered children, but one of the key players in these lawsuits is a father who, when it was just about him, was like, I don't want to fight this. But when he saw Alex Jones turning on other families after other shootings, that's when he said, I can't let this happen to other people. So this kind of dogged determination to get justice. And how much Jones will end up paying in the end is in doubt, but one of the lawyers for the families said this, and I think this kind of reflects how these families are feeling now. We are going to chase Alex Jones to the ends of the earth for every last dollar. So they are determined, and that determination seems to have paid off, at least for now, for a little bit. So the widow did not come to the judge one time and ask for justice and not get it and go away. What it says is she kept coming. She persisted. And this is the thing about her persistence. It didn't change the judge's mind. He didn't think, oh yeah, you're right. You're right, there's been an injustice here. It didn't do that. It didn't get him to believe in God. It didn't get him to see the justice of her cause. It just plain wore him down. I mean, this is kind of comical. So he says this, because this widow keeps bothering me, I'll grant her justice so that she does not wear me out by continually coming to me. And in a way, who cares whether he was convinced or not? I think the point here is you just keep coming for justice no matter what, and you will get it. Maybe you'll convince a judge, but maybe you'll just wear them out. So part of the lesson here is that even against the worst odds, if we are persistent, justice is coming into this world. So even if those 345 election deniers get elected and make it harder for people to vote, justice is coming. Even for someone with the wealth and power and voice of Alex Jones, justice is coming. Even if judges and justices, the very people who are supposed to be in charge of justice, even if they are corrupt, justice